Well, all right. How are we doing, my Pelicans fans? We feeling good? We feeling good? Because CJ McCollum, guess what? No longer a New Orleans Pelican. I know a lot of people for a couple seasons were calling for this, asking for this, and I, for one, am so very excited to finally not have to hear anyone's CJ McCollum mock trades. Thank God. All right. But yeah, are we happy now? Is this a fun thing? Oh, what's this? We have a Jordan Poole coming in. How we feeling now? A little more uncertain, maybe a little bit of buyer's remorse already. Yeah, this is an interesting move. I was perusing the Pelicans subreddit, seeing what the community, how they were feeling. And it's interesting because, of course, you had a select few people who are like, hey, Jordan Poole, at the end of the day, is a young guy with championship experience. He's a shooter. There were a select few minority of people who were fairly excited about this. Many more people were like, man, we just traded a guy on an expiring contract for a guy with another year on his contract who had a real stinker of a season, his first season in Washington. And, of course, a lot of people are very doubtful of this move. But the overwhelming, most upvoted comment on there was just, hey, fuck it, why not? Which is honestly kind of how I'm feeling at this point too. Like right now, I'm just kind of excited that something happened. If you watched any of my other videos, you'll know that I was kind of getting the vibes that this would be a very quiet off season from the Pelicans, as we're wont to do frequently. And honestly, I don't know. I'm torn because on the one hand, CJ was not necessarily the move I most wanted to see, but also I'm kind of just happy for some change of scenery, for something different. So I guess let's go ahead and get into things, shall we? So CJ, man, I have been at numerous points in his career as a Pelican a bit of a CJ defender because there's a certain subset of the fan base that just kind of seem to really love to have him as a scapegoat. And I get it. There were some times where it was mind-numbing, baffling, his decision making, especially at the end of games, tunnel vision, and it's so bizarre because in so many ways he seems like such a smart guy. Obviously, him and I have a very similar pedigree. We both have our journalism degrees, and he did so many great things for his team as far as culture, motivation. Like, regardless of whatever happened on the court, I could tell guys never really held it against him much. Like, they all did look up to CJ, and he was a good part of the culture. And it was nice to have a guy who was sort of a star player. I mean, he's never made an all-star team, but certainly he's performed pretty close to that level. It was nice to have one of those guys actually come to New Orleans, not by choice, but when he came here, he seemed really excited and he wanted to embrace the city and all those aspects. And I know guys just kind of roll their eyes about, like, yeah, I mean, that's great. But at the same time, there are so many good players who have been here who didn't really want to be here and didn't really embrace the city. It counts for something. But yeah, it is just a bit weird knowing that Brandon Ingram's gone, CJ McCollum's gone, Zion is still here and likely will remain here, but everything's just continually weird and up in the air with regards to Zion. And it does feel like an era in New Orleans just kind of ended very quietly, which I guess that's what happens when you can't capitalize on your moment and you just hold on to guys with diminishing results and things just kind of fizzle out. And that's certainly how it feels. It was, in some ways, I guess, a bit more dramatic than that. I mean, we had a great season where we won 49 games. The next season was a complete disaster where, the first half of the season in 2024, we only won like 6 games or something. It's, in some ways, it felt like a dramatic crash and burn, but in other ways, it was just kind of like, okay, guys, time just comes and then they're gone. And I do hope that now that CJ's off the team and we no longer have that specific pressure to perform, we can look back on all these moments in a bit of hindsight. I do hope CJ McCollum will have some positive legacy in New Orleans as a guy who came in and tried to help turn the culture around, as a guy who, goddamn, I mean, he did try. I know that results do matter, and there were some times where you do question his leadership, specifically on the court. Off the court, excellent leader. On the court, though, and it was tough because a lot of times he was forced into a role that he really shouldn't have had because he's never really been that much of a playmaker. He's always been a pure shooting guard, and there were some times where we just really forced him into the point guard role because other guys were injured or our roster just was not there. So that was a tough role for him, and he you could definitely tell he tried to embrace it. It was just not in his nature, and yeah, generally speaking, always seemed to be a guy who played much better alongside a point guard who could make those split-second decisions. And but he definitely had his moments, though. Obviously that one playoff series where we looked really solid against the Suns, he was a big part of that, and even just getting us there, of course. And I mean, throughout many bad stretches in many seasons, there were times when he did take over and was actually successful. I mean, like the last really solid game from him I remember was ironically against the Wizards this past season, and going into 2025 we just looked so desperately putridly terrible, and we had back-to-back games against the Wizards, and it was unclear if we could even win games against them because goddamn everybody was beating us down. And then CJ played some hero ball and got us a couple back-to-back wins, and that felt pretty good. And I guess you're like, what are we even talking about here? Beating the Wizards? Yeah, things are dire right now, and I just kind of like grasping at straws and filaments of anything sort of positive. But I think it is just kind of unfortunate that like the disappointment of this team never really capitalizing off of our playoff success in 2022. Success, we didn't even win the series, but there was a time seemed hopeful after we won 2 games against the Suns. It's just kind of a shame that like all that brightness has faded, and whatever positive things came from this era of CJ McCollum and Willie Green and Zion and Ingram, it's probably just going to be forgotten, possibly in the ether. We'll see. But in general, I'm wishing the best for CJ. I think it's interesting that he's on the Wizards. I mean, I want to joke about, oh no, stuck in Washington purgatory, woe is him. But to be honest, it could be another good thing for him. I mean, I would like to think that he could still find a way to contribute meaningful minutes on a good like playoff team somewhere, but him still being on his current contract, making what he's making, at least for now, at least until his contract's up. One season with the Wizards, I'll be curious to see what he can do as a leader on that team, providing a similar mentorship role to what he provided here in New Orleans, and for young guys like Koulibaly and Sarr and George. I'm curious what kind of impact he'll have on the culture in Washington. So wishing the best for him. And moving along to what we're getting. Yeah, you might think it's a bit weird that we get Jordan Poole, and I just spend all this time talking about CJ McCollum and losing him. But really, it's just like, I don't know what to make of Jordan Poole, man. I don't know whether to be excited. I don't know whether to be nervous. I mean, I'm not going to lie, I'm a little bit excited. Like I said, I'm just kind of happy that something interesting has happened, and this is certainly interesting. It could be terrible. I'm not going to lie, it could be terrible, and we do have him for, I think, a minimum of 2 seasons now, which is, once again, kind of sucks to, like when I made my last video about the Pelicans, I'm like, look, at the end of the day, whatever the CJ situation was, now he at least is an expiring contract, and we're probably going to be bad this next season anyway. You just wait it out and move on. 2 years isn't an eternity more, but I would love for us to somehow try and turn it around in these 2 years, and that could be difficult if we've got Jordan Poole under contract and he's not easy to move. Hopefully he could have some new life here in New Orleans. I mean, I'm always going to hope for that. I mean, I'm not coming in here to be like, boo, Jordan Poole. I know he's going to suck. I don't want him on this team at all. I don't like to think about that for any player. And to be honest with Jordan Poole, it's really just that one really bad season in Washington the first time. And, Washington was also really bad this past season. They were tanking, and he didn't exactly contribute to a ton of wins, but he did look much better. And maybe you can hope that one first season in Washington, things were just weird. He was feeling some type of way about being pushed out of Golden State, and just had his mentality in a bad place. I mean, I am a bit concerned about Jordan Poole's mentality because a lot of what he said after winning that 2022 championship with the Warriors was just kind of like he seemed to have the idea of like his legacy was cemented, and he's still so young. I'm like, come on, dude, you got to be hungrier than that. And I feel like if you've made it to the NBA, if you've come this far, and if you're still as relatively young as Jordan Poole is, like that hunger's going to come around at some point, right? Like you see some guys in the league like DeAndre Ayton who kind of seem to check out and not really care about trying to make something more of themselves. I feel like for a guy like Jordan Poole specifically, at some point, man, he's got to like really lock in and try to do something else with his career. And hopefully that can happen in New Orleans. And look, he did buy in when he was in Golden State. He was pretty darn solid for that playoff run where they went all the way and won the chip. And I would love to see him tap into more of that, but I think a lot of that was he had a great coach, great culture, great system, good mentors like Steph Curry. I don't know if he's getting any of that now here in New Orleans. Sorry to say, it's like, and I want to believe in Willie as the hustle culture guy who uplifts his players and just kind of has a fun but serious atmosphere. That's like kind of what Willie has been pitching himself as for the past several seasons, but we see again and again, it seems like after season and season of just not great results and poor lineups and everything, I just don't know if players are really buying into that right now. Circumstances could be different now with Joe Dumars in charge, and I don't know. I think Willie just has a big task ahead of him trying to get players to buy in, and maybe Jordan Poole is in a fresh environment, maybe happy to be out of Washington, maybe he's ready to just, pick up whatever Willie's putting down. I would hope. As so long as Willie Green is the coach, I'm hoping he'll find a way to make all this work out. So long as Jordan Poole's on the team, I hope he makes it work out, and I hope he has another good season, because, his statistics last year in Washington were solid. I'm not going to pretend like I watched a ton of Washington Wizards games last season, but it was clear that he was a lot more comfortable than he was the previous season, and I do think that one terrible season, people just really loved to join the Jordan Poole hate bandwagon, and people loved posting all the lowlights. There were so many great memes that came from all the clips of him falling down on the floor and whatnot, but if you're aiming to do that, it can be relatively easy to find those lowlights and make a guy look terrible. And I'm not saying he didn't deserve that kind of criticism or mockery, but you know how it is. People love to build narratives, and clearly, there's more to a player than that. I'm confident that, I'm not confident that Jordan Poole is going to be a great player from here on out, but I'm confident that there's more to him than simply the shot chucking whatever he was that one season, But yeah, I am just worried that the Pelicans are not a great environment for him. It just kind of seems like we might have some maturity issues from certain areas, and there are some really good disciplined guys on the team still, guys like Jose and Herb, and I'm hoping DeJounte Murray can be one of those guys as well. I don't know how much he's going to be around the other guys as he continues to rehab his injury, and obviously, DeJounte Murray had a lot of personal stuff going on last season that affected his mentality. I'm just hoping that, after a terrible season, guys will come into this season with feeling like, hey, we got nothing to lose. Vibes will be a little bit better with some pressure off, and then we can just kind of start to build ourselves back up from square one. So, yeah, wishing the best for Jordan Poole. Fairly disappointed Kelly Olynyk was included in this trade, and I feel like this picture here, that's like his reaction when he found out it happened. Like, what? Y'all are already shipping me out? Because, man, I'm not going to lie. Like, okay, if Zion is going to continue to be on the team, and we're going to keep trying to do the Zion thing and build around him, damn if Kelly Olynyk didn't seem like finally one of the perfect bigs to pair alongside him. I mean, we've tried a whole lot of different bigs next to Zion at this point, and it's been like, man, if only we had a smart screen setting, passing guy who can be physical and big, but also take some jump shots and all that good stuff. And along comes Kelly Olynyk as just kind of a guy the Raptors just threw to us, and it was like, great, we finally have one of these guys. And sure, you don't really want him to start, and hopefully we have better options, but a solid rotation piece that fits pretty well with what we're hopefully trying to do with Zion, especially, and with other guys too. I think he had good chemistry with Messi. There were some times where he'd just like do a little, he'd be in the post and he'd just do a little pocket pass out to Messi for a dunk. That stuff was kind of cool. So yeah, I'm gonna miss Kelly Olynyk a little bit. I understand it is what it is, and you're hoping that Messi continues to develop and that Carlo continues to develop, and we just have other options at big man going forward who are hopefully younger. But yeah, and then I think it's really interesting and pretty cool that Sadiq Bey was included in this. I wish I could be more confident that he'll turn into something real. Obviously, he's dealing with an ACL injury that kept him out like the entirety of last season, so that sucks, and wishing the best for him coming into New Orleans now. Hopefully he can just get a fresh start and do something interesting. But Sadiq Bey is really a player I had my eyes on, but since before he was drafted, coming out of Villanova. I'm really high on a lot of Villanova guys. I think generally speaking, they have a great culture there. Obviously, we've seen what they've wrought now in the NBA with having Brunson and Bridges and Josh Hart and Dante DiVincenzo and all those guys, just some of the hardest working, best role players, guys who are just willing to like get dirty and do whatever. Like I'm a big fan of the Villanova guys, and I was hoping we would see some of that from Sadiq Bey. And early on, when he was about to be drafted, I saw him in some mock drafts to be taken by the Pelicans. So I had my eyes on him, and when Detroit ended up drafting him, I thought it was a good pick. And for a while, he really seemed to flash some potential in Detroit. I was kind of excited about Sadiq Bey. I think he had like a 50-point game. He seemed like one of those guys where it's like, okay, you're not so confident that he's going to be like a super consistent contributor, but he had those flashes where it's like, okay, maybe in a microwave capacity, if he has a particularly hot game, you play him a few more minutes, and then he has one of those games where he goes off and hits a ton of threes and is one of those off the bench scorers that could be pretty critical. And look, I mean, he's a pretty strong forward, solid rebounder, you know, passing numbers are nothing too impressive. Mainly, your big concern is just like for his whole career at this point, he's like averaged 40% from the field, which is far from ideal, obviously. But, weird environment being on the rebuilding Pistons than being on a Hawks team that was really struggling to figure out how to use all their pieces. And then he was on the Wizards where he didn't even get to play. So he's had a strange career, and I'm really hoping that he can find some stability for however long he's in New Orleans, and he can finally deliver on some of the promise that I saw, because we need all the shooters we can get, and his career shooting averages are not fantastic, but you see sometimes he's like kind of flirting with jumping up into more of like the 40-point shooting range. I would love to see it happen. I don't want to give up on Sadiq Bey, and I guess we'll just see what happens. But in general, this was a pretty interesting trade to go down this Tuesday. Whole lot of other trades have gone down, and I feel terrible that I've hardly talked about any of them. But with the off-season newly begun, I feel a renewed vigor to try and just put out a ton of videos. So maybe consider subscribing. I've never asked for, in none of my videos before have I ever asked for anyone to subscribe, because I don't like to bother people. But I figure, hey, I'm going to be trying this thing, maybe take a chance if you found this entertaining at all. But yeah, that being said, thanks y'all for watching, and a lot of big stuff going down. The draft is tomorrow. I've got so many ideas, so just stay tuned, and we'll see what the Pelicans do here now.